Stop and frisk. There are two sides to this story. Actually, it's more than that. Call it a raging storm would be more correct. A storm with two areas of convection, and right in the center, statistics would show that 87% of persons stopped by New York police last year, 2011, were either black or Latino. There are some other alarming statistics that we'll be discussing as we dive right into the middle of this storm. My guest will include a man who was arrested and draws a link between that arrest and stop and frisk. Also joining me in this discussion is a community leader who is at the forefront of community opposition to this. But we begin with another battle, the battle for Borough Hall. Right now, it's hardly a battle as elections aren't due until 2013. So there is no rage, but there's certainly excitement brewing. Joining me to discuss the race for borough president is one of the favorites this early in the contest, State Senator Eric Adams. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you very much. A pleasure being here.
You announced early.
You got to start early, and we're still at the process now of looking at the seat because, as you stated, this is the beginning of the process. I'm still running for my Senate seat, but I've always told my son, and I tell young people, have a plan for the future. Always look to be promoted. Don't look to be stagnant and stay in one position. And you should always dream for more, and you should always look for more. And that doesn't mean that it's automatic. It doesn't mean that merely because you desire something that you're going to accomplish it. It has to be married with good, hard labor to produce the product that people say, I believe in, to move to that next step.
That is such a great message for young people. You've had a long history in the police department, and certainly reaching where you have reached now, that's been no accident.
So true, so true. And it was well thought out. It was something that I desired when I became a police officer. I wanted to be a public servant. And I thought that by becoming a person that patrolled the streets, you could have an understanding before you start to write laws that impact the streets or govern the streets. You should understand the inner details of it, because many people legislate from 200,000 feet up, and so you don't have a full picture of what's taking place on the ground. And so when you walk the streets, when you went into the public houses, when you went into the schools, when you saw some of the needs and what bad policies produce, you have now a different view of how you can go into any governmental office and have a real impact. I don't look at stats. I look at human beings, and I govern based on what I have observed as a law enforcement officer.
Later on, when we come back to talk about stop and frisk, I want to go back to some of what you said just now about knowing your community,
right,
and actually not relying on these statistics and stories that have no real relationship to what is actually going on.
So true.
But you're doing two things at the same time now.
Yes.
You're running for state senate for re-election. How do you handle both of those?
Well, I've always done more than one thing. When I became a police officer and decided to go back to school, I went back to obtain my associate's degree, my bachelor's, and then my master's degree. But at the same time, I was studying to become a sergeant, a lieutenant, and a captain. And so it has never been a thought process on my part that you sit back and just utilize your idle time of doing nothing. I've always found creative ways to do so. And so I enjoy being a state senator, and I have a great reputation within my community, particularly about accessibility. My constituents know that I'm accessible. They call me on my cell phone, or they email me, or they text me, or they Twitter me. They use whatever social media, any form of communication, or they pop in the office. And so I know that while running for office, I still have to do my job as a state senator. I don't recall any time in my life, learning from my parents, I've never had one job. And so just as you have to do one job, when you get off that job, you need to do the next job. There's so much need in our communities that we really shouldn't sit back and just wait for things to happen. So I have to fulfill my obligation as a state senator. At the same time, I'm looking forward to one day becoming the borough president of Brooklyn.
Why do you want to become borough president?
Because this is a great borough. This, when you look at the number of people, this is the largest borough in the greatest city. in the greatest country on the globe. And this is the borough where you can do some good things. I believe Marty Markowitz has done a great job as being a cheerleader for this borough, and I would like to build on his success and move forward some of the things that he's doing. But at the same time, the borough must stay affordable. It must stay affordable for the countless number of New Yorkers who stayed here in this borough during the difficult times. You know, while other communities were waking up to alarm clocks, we were waking up to gunshots, but we didn't flee. We stayed. We built the community. We may not have had the finest jobs in the city, but we were employed enough to come back home and make this a place that people want to invest in. Now that this borough is attractive to many people throughout the borough, throughout the city, we don't want those good New Yorkers from Bay Ridge, from Bensonhurst, from Brownsville, from Bedford-Stuyvesant, and the Slopes and the Heights. We don't want them to feel that the borough is no longer affordable to them. And I think that's the role and the mandate for the next borough president, to make sure that this borough remains affordable and a place where you can raise children and families.
You know, there's some people who say that the position of borough president is a powerless position. I'm sure you've heard that.
Yes.
How do you remove that label, that thinking?
Mm-hmm. The removal of that label.
And I think because people say that the position is a titular position, as opposed to a position such as which you currently hold.
So true. The removal of that label should not be done vocally. It must be done in your activity. What type of actions should one do? And just as when I was a police officer, when I started 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, many people thought being a police officer was this one definition of a police officer. And I don't believe any of us can afford to be just. You can't be just a teacher. You must leave the classroom and go out and tutor the countless number of children that are starving for educational knowledge. You can't be just a doctor. You must leave the hospital and be a doctor without walls and go out and deal with the high diabetes, obesity, and other issues, and the lack of affordable health care. You can't be just a firefighter. You can't be just a cop. So I can't be just a borough president. I can't merely look at what the charter defines the office as. I must be creative in my thought and see how do I use the existing tools such as land usage, which a borough president is responsible for, and many people don't realize that borough president is also able to write legislation. Many borough presidents don't do that, but they can write legislation. And then something that's very important, borough president can reshape the community boards. Have young people participate on the community boards. Make sure people don't believe that your appointment to the board is a lifetime appointment. We need creative ideas, and creative ideas come from turning over the soil to allow fresh ideas to come in, learn from those people who are there, and actually how to make our communities stronger. And those are some of the things that I want to do as the borough president.
Interesting hearing you say that. I was at a church service this week, and I heard the pastor say that he went into this church and they're all old people. And that if you go into a church and there are no young people, it means the church is dying. If you have a community board and there are no young people, there are these stereotypes about young people, and we hear so much about young people and violence and all this, but we never hear, I've not heard anyone saying, I want to get young people in a community board.
So true, and there's so many things we can do, and our young people are fantastic, creative, energetic, and we don't allow their creative juices to flow. We stymie their ability, and you know, anyone who is a true study of history would tell you that the winds of change have always been blown by young people. Adults may attempt to grab and state that they have made the great accomplishments, but all through history, young people were the ones that decided how they wanted the globe to change. I don't care if it's Soweto, South Africa, or if it's in the deep south of America. Young people participated in moving the globe in the right direction. They took a great inhale and blew this planet where they wanted to go, and we need to give them the opportunity to do so now. And the community board is one place where we can do that.
I know several years ago you discouraged young men from sagging, and in fact you launched this campaign that was called Stop the Sag. What are your feelings about the success of that campaign, or the meaningfulness of that campaign?
Well, I think the mere fact that the question was raised, that you just raised the question, shows that the campaign was doing what it intended to do. Oftentimes, people take a campaign and they wanted to do what they think it should do, but I was very clear on what I wanted the campaign to do, and that was to start the discussion that antisocial behavior should never be used as a normal, accepted behavior within our community. I wasn't targeting young people. I was targeting adults. Young people are always going to do something that's pushing the envelope. That's what meaning young is. I mean, when I was a child, I wore bell bottoms and did all sorts of things, wore my hair too long. As hard as it to believe, I had hair at one time.
So did I.
And so what I was saying to adults, the role of an adult is to tell a young person when they have gone too far. All of our children are supposed to reach a stage in their life when they say, Dad, I know what you were talking about. Mom, I know what you were talking about. They're not saying that now because we're not talking about anything. We're not giving them the standards. Too much time is trying to be cool and hip, and we want to be hip to our young people. I'm not hip to my son. I'm the square that tells you no when you're going too far. And I don't want to be your buddy. I'm your father. And when we start realizing the obligation and responsibility of raising children is not something that your child is supposed to like you. I'm a firm believer parenting is a retrospective appreciation. And so what my SAG was saying, if you're going to sneak around the corner and SAG, that's up to you. But while you're in my presence, when you walk in my house, when you sit in the school classroom, as adults, we're supposed to say, here are the socializing skills you need to know. And if you don't use them throughout life, fine. But at a minimum, you need to be instructed on what are those social skills. And we're not doing that. I see sagging in classrooms and schools. I spoke to Dennis Walcott.
Not in my class.
Right, and that's important. I spoke to Dennis Walcott, the chancellor, and said we need to set a standard in the schools because what our children are not learning at home, they need to learn inside the schools. And it's more than 1 and 1 equals 2 to be successful in this society.
State Senator Adams, you're running for re-election later this year.
Yes.
And then next year is the big race.
Yes, it is.
State Senator Eric Adams, this year running for re-election. Next year running for Brooklyn Borough President. And of course, one of the things that will be a great topic, a continuing topic, is stop and frisk. And we are joined by two gentlemen who have been working diligently over the last, I guess, several months, although some of the events over the last couple of weeks have made your work more prominent and brought your work to the fore. Robert Pinter. Robert is with the campaign to stop false arrests.
Correct.
And we're going to hear your story in a short while. And Burchell Marcus, who is the Director of Community Advocate Development Organization. I'm going to begin with you. Your tag says stop and frisk. Let's talk about stop and frisk.
Yes, sure. Stop and frisk is something that's illegal and unconstitutional. And it's something that's very demoralizing. You know, when, you walk the streets and see the police officers jumping on the cars like SWAT teams and grabbing people and throwing them to the ground and searching them without any just cause. And if they don't find anything on them, they'll pick them up and they'll ask them their name and so forth, and then they'll tell them, well, look, get out of here, go on home. And if the people ask, well, why am I being stopped, to justify why they stopped them, many times I've witnessed them either arresting them and charging them with disorderly conduct. And when they get downtown, they get an ACD, and they tell them, well, 6 months, everything will be dismissed, and it's not so. Those arrests goes on their record, and if they go for a job or try to get into college, it hampers them. And these are law-abiding citizens in our community. The people who needs to be stopped are not being stopped. It's hard-working people.
I know you can speak for an entire half an hour.
Oh, yes.
Senator Adams, you said that stop and frisk is a police tactic that damages relationships between police and the public.
Right, and that's the abuse of it. And that's one thing that people must understand. Stop and frisk on its own is not bad. is when you abuse the tool. As a police officer, I used stop and frisk, and as a supervisor, I supervised my officers that used it. It's a great tool when it's used correctly. We have taken that tool and turned it into a quota tool. Instead of stopping people because we believe they committed a crime, we're stopping people to fill a quota, and that's two different uses, and that's what the argument is.
Mr. Pinter, you had an arrest some years ago.
Yes. It wasn't the classic stop and frisk scenario, but I was in a video store in the East Village near my home. I was on my way home from work. I'm a massage therapist. I worked at Housing Works, which is an AIDS organization, where I did medical massage therapy on the clients there. Anyways, I was on my way home and stopped in the video store, and I was going to purchase a video, and a young man was smiling at me and acting very flirtatious with me, and he engaged me in a conversation. We ended up leaving the store together. On the way out of the store, he offered me $50. And as we were walking out of the store, I didn't even respond to him. We got outside, and I just thought, I'm not going to do anything with this guy. So I continued walking in the direction of my home and was arrested by a team of undercover vice squad officers. At the time, I didn't even know why I was being arrested. When finally he answered my question and said, loitering for the purpose of soliciting prostitution, I said, "You have to be kidding me." I said, "I was in that store shopping for a DVD. He butted his nose into my business and created this whole incident, So I continue. We found later that the police had targeted 6 of these stores and were arresting men, and I was 52 at the time, and many of the men that were arrested were in their 40s and 50s with no prior arrests. It turns out that the police had targeted 6 of these video stores. They had instituted nuisance abatement litigation against the stores and were manufacturing arrests to use as evidence to try and close the stores down. And within, I'd say, 6 months, Kelly shut the operation down because of the activism in the gay community that I and other activists instituted.
2 things coming out of that story. 1, the importance of activism.
Yes.
But 2, targeting. Targeting stores, targeting Black and Latino youth.
Right.
Okay.
And using police tactics to carry out another agenda. Someone in the area may not have liked the store there, and so you use police tactics to carry out an agenda outside of crime fighting. That's a problem. And that was first born under the Giuliani administration, and now this administration has embraced that same concept of using the police department to carry out a non-law enforcement agenda.
Right.
I know we are all alarmed about this level of violence in our community. We will all remember July 4th.
Right.
And was it 17 people who were murdered?
Who
were shot. 17 people who were shot on July 4th. The commissioner has said that the community has been shockingly silent. Now, I know you invited the commissioner to visit your constituency, and he refused. Let's talk about that.
Well, because he first stated that leaders, then he stated that except for Reverend Sharpton, then he changed it again and stated except for ministers, so he just kept changing what he was saying. And so what I said to him, I said, Commissioner, why don't you come on the ground and see what people are doing every day? Walk with me through the community and look at the various organizations so you can see firsthand. And he knows of many of these organizations, and that's why I was outraged by his comments, because he was aware of what many people are doing. People who are outraged by violence, they're not only going to stand on the rooftop and say, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. No, they're going to go and start some productive programs that they can do to stop the violence. They're going to stop Boy Scouts, Little Leagues, football teams, nonviolent groups. We have a countless number of people, ministers, preachers, politicians, mechanics, that are doing things to deal with the issue of violence. And so there was a hidden message he was saying. He was saying that blacks don't care about the violence in their community, and that is untrue. And I don't want that to stay out there. And I said, we need to immediately say you are wrong and you should not be saying that, and come visit the community and see what the great people are doing in the community.
You know, when the first statistics came out by the NYCLU about the amount of stop and frisk that was conducted by the New York City Police Department, that was just an estimate. And we found it to be a lot more than that. But as for what was recorded, it raised the alarm that when Brother Cornel West decided to put out the call along with Carl Dix to put an end to this injustice that was being done, and what it was leading to was mass incarceration, because many times innocent people are being arrested and charged with false charges, and it's being upheld by the Justice Department. So I've been calling all along to at least address the issues that when the officers lie on innocent people and they go downtown and the DAs are pushing the envelope to get these people prosecuted, it raised some eyebrows. And we're saying this is part of what's leading to mass incarceration. This is why we have to make sure that stop and frisk is no longer implemented in our communities.
Has that been effective? Or let's talk about the effectiveness of stop and frisk.
Right. Good question. Good question.
Well, I can't see where it's working. If after stopping and frisking 700,000 people in the city of New York, and there's still, to say that that is going to get the guns off the street, and then we have an outbreak of violence like this with the guns, to me it points to that the policy is failing.
Right, and it's clearly is not successful. You know, the commissioner has wedded himself to this policy, and he wants to now divorce himself from the bad results. There are no empirical studies that state stop and frisk brings down violence. Over close to 90% of the people who are stopped did nothing wrong at all. So we're not searching the bad people. Instead, when you look at the Supreme Court's reason for allowing stop and frisk, they said be cautious because it deals with the integrity of people. This strikes at the heart of our country's belief of your right not to be searched and seized under illegal circumstances. And so it's clear that the policy has failed. It's not a successful policy. And the anger of this unsuccessful policy is having them lash out now at those who have criticized the policy. Criticizing stop and frisk has nothing to do with our desire to stop violence. Two separate incidents, and you can't merge them together because they don't belong together.
What can elected officials and community leaders like yourselves, what can you do to eliminate or have stop and frisks performed in a different way, and also to reduce the violence in our communities?
Well, first of all, stopping people and frisking them will not alleviate the violence in the community. What will alleviate the violence in the community, and we've been saying this all along, is when the police and the community are able to work together, work hand in hand to root out the people who are actually causing the violence within the community. Now it's that if the police are targeting the innocent people, it will be very hard to get those people to cooperate with the police and tell on the people who are actually committing the crimes. No one wants the problem to reach their doorstep. They are willing to stand up and say something. But if I'm a police officer and every time I see you and I'm targeting you and stopping you for no reason at all, you're going to get angry at me. Before, we used to have police officers in the community, the beat officers, meeting and talking and discussing things with the people in the community, so they'd know who the good guys were and who the bad guys were.
Now, that's probably not happening anymore.
It's not happening.
Yes, Mr.
No, I think it's exactly the opposite, that stop and frisk is such a corrosive element in the community that people, I think it actually, in some respects, could make public safety even more problematic because people do not want to access the one source that they should be turning to for public safety, which is the police officer. I hope to effect some change by the activism that I'm engaged in. I've taken my work to the Police Reform Organizing Project, where we're working. What I particularly like to do is to talk to elected officials and discuss the issue with them. There's been several city council members that have been that I've talked to, and that have also, have spoken out about violence. Melissa Mark Viverito, Jamani Williams, and others that have spoken out strongly about the violence in the neighborhoods. And it's outrageous that the commissioner would use those shootings on the July 4th weekend to cause this kind of divisive.
Sure. Well, let's talk about a reality.
Okay.
The violence is there,
Right.
Yeah.
and our young people are involved.
Right.
Why are our youth out of control?
But they're not, and that's what we need to be really careful about. It's almost like walking into a building and you smell urine on an elevator and you say, these people in this building are all animals. No, one person pissed in the hallway. So you can't continue to target all our young people based on the behavior of the numerical minority. And many of the people who are committing crimes are repeated offenders. 99.9% of our young people get up every day, they go to school, they go to employment, they try to find a job, they're doing good things, but no one wants to look at that. They only want to look at the small number who are creating violence. Our young people are fine. We need to do a better job of employing them, giving them resources, and nurturing them instead of targeting them the way we do.
I spoke, or I saw an interview recently with Khalil Gibran Muhammad on the Bill Moyer Show, where he talked about the historical perspective that kind of precedes Stop and Frisk, about the criminalizing of African Americans from the era of slavery through the current period, and how maybe the terms have changed, but the actual intent behind the policy of Stop and Frisk is basically saying the same thing. We're criminalizing this entire group of people.
And the criminalizing must stop. I'm
Yes.
afraid that we must stop as well. I want to thank State Senator Eric Adams for joining us for this discussion. Also want to thank you, Mr. Robert Pinter, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Burchell Marcus. I want to applaud the work that you are doing in your communities to make our communities better. And we at Brooklyn 45 will do all we can to help you make sure that you're successful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Brooklyn 45. I'm Sam Tate.